Doctor, can we start now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello everyone. Good morning from Indonesia. My name is Aulia Nur Kasiwi as moderator in first session. Today, before start the session, I would like to remind you about the Tribune. If you have Instagram, you can upload your Tribune in your Instagram. And don't forget to take the IGoPSS Instagram. But if you don't have Instagram, you can upload the Tribune in WhatsApp group, okay? Now, move to the session. You will be hearing a presentation from Dr. Reni Budi Setaningrum. With title, Policy Perspective on Green Economy, Indonesian Practice. Before start the presentation, I would like to mention about the biodata Dr. Reni. First, personal information. Name Dr. Reni Budi Setaningrum, SH M.Kn, Higher Education Institution, Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. Second, education, PhD in Gajah Mada University on 2018. Master on Notary in Pajajaran University on 2012. Bachelor of Law in Gajah Mada University on 1999. Third, teaching experience, year 2016 until present, undergraduate program in Law Faculty, Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. Number 1, Business Law. Number 2, Competition Law. Number 3, Consumer Protection Law. Number 4, Banking Law. Number 5, Electronic Commerce Law. And last, Disruptive Innovation Study. For international collaboration research experience, number 1 in Van Vollenhoven Institute, Leiden University, Netherlands, on 2018 until 2020. Second, Ahmad Ibrahim, Kuliah of Law, IIUM, Malaysia, on 2022 until present. Now let's start the presentation. Please welcome Dr. Reni. Time is yours.
Thank you, Nana. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's very happy to see you again in the third days. I hope we are in good health today, and I hope you have still the same spirit as the first day. Okay, today, as my expertise, I'm a law lecturer, so we will discuss about the policy perspective in green economy, especially Indonesian practice. So first, we have to discuss the backgrounds of the emergence of green economy implementation in the world. The first one is greedy economy. Greedy economic behavior, or we call greedy economy, is a human behavior that uses natural resources recklessly, massively, and exploitatively in order to earn high profits and high revenue. In this behavior, humans only think about the economic benefits that can be obtained from their activities without considering or anticipating short-term and even long-term negative impacts. The examples of greedy economy are mining exploitation carried out without adequate environmental impact analysis, massive factory and industrial construction without proper waste disposal, the use of pesticides and chemicals to eradicate insects, the use of chemical fertilizer in agriculture, use of trowels and bombs to catch fish in the sea, and the chemical feedings on chickens and other livestock. And also the clearing of forests to make way for plantation, and without exception, the unwise use of non-renewable energy. Okay, how does greedy economy happens? Of course, it's not the fault of just one party. It's not only the fault of the government. It's also not just the fault of the business actors, but it's also the fault of every party. The greedy economy is caused by the negligence of the government. Why do I say government negligence? In this case, in addition to the negligence and mistake of business actors, there are several other possibilities. First, the process of granting licenses for industries that are not according to the procedure. For example, bribes. Bribery happens quite often in Indonesia, especially. There are bribes received by the government so that various industries that damage the environment can operate. Secondly, the absence of supervision and sanctions or law enforcement in the event of violation. There are quite a number of cases that hazardous waste disposal in the rivers that only been sanctioned after public reports or after viral on social media. Third, the lack of education for business actors. For example, farmers and breeders, they do not realize, they do not understand the dangers of using chemicals as fertilizer or chemicals for food, for the livestock, the chicken, especially because Indonesia is one of the countries that produce chemical fertilizer, so Indonesia is impossible to prohibit the use of chemical fertilizers. This greedy economic behavior has many negative impacts to our planet. Locally, greedy economy causes environmental damage. For example, river pollution, environmental damage due to former mines, the decreased water discharge due to deforestation, decreased soil fertility levels, health problem due to consuming food which is contaminated with chemicals, etc. But globally, this damage accumulates and resulted in climate change. Climate change is characterized by a global increase in air temperature, which we call global warming, melting ice in Antarctica, and melting ice in the highest mountains in the world, heat waves in various continents such as European, they got heat waves recently, and seasonal shift in our tropical countries. We are in Southeast Asia has several storms that affects the season and the weather. Maybe you even heard about El Nino, La Nina, etc. From economic perspective, the exploitative use of natural resources increase income for large industries and large capitalized business. But how about the poor? When the government does not make the right policies, the rich will get richer, but the poor will still remain poor. On the other hand, the poor will be exploited by the rich through providing insufficient wages due to their low education levels. How this can be happen? This can be happen because there are limited access to high education for poor citizens and limited access to capital for small businesses. If humans continue to be greedy in using human resources, then the long-term risk is the depletion or the run out of various non-renewable natural resources such as oil, natural gas, and various other mining products such as coals. Next. Before we discuss the green economy further, and we have discussed the green economy from Professor Dr. Halima and Dr. Christine Tenorio in the first day. So I will discuss briefly about green economy. So before we discuss about the green economy, there was already a term called blue economy. And we are in Indonesia have implemented this blue economy a few years ago. So what is the similarity and differences between green economy and a blue economy? Actually, the concept of blue economy itself is not much different from the concept of green economy. The basic concept is about sustainability. In terms of environmental and economic emphasis. But the main difference between blue economy and green economy lies in the focus of economic development, or they are different in the objects. If Indonesian green economy focus on sustainable economic development and reducing risk on environmental damage, then the blue economy is more focused in sustainable economic development in marine sector. Because Indonesia is a maritime country and Indonesia has abundant marine resources within 19,000 trillion from marine resources. So through the blue economic concept, Indonesia wants to focus on sustainable development in the marine sector. So the green economy and blue economy is the same concept about sustainability economy, but the blue economy is focused in the marine sector. Next, please. As Dr. Christine B. Tenorio and Dr. Halima already discussed in the first day, what is green economy? The green economy, the United Nations Environment Program, M.IP, referred a green economy is a low carbon, resource saving, and socially inclusive or non-discriminating economic activity. It cannot be separated from the aspect of protecting natural and also human resource and also reducing poverty. There are 5 principles in green economy. The first principle is well-being. Another term for well-being is welfare. A green economy must create genuine, sustained, shared welfare, shared well-being, prioritize human development, health, happiness, education, and community. The second principle, which will be discussed further today, is justice principle. A green economy emphasizes equality, community cohesion, and supporting human rights, especially the rights of minorities and marginalized. It's also support the rights of women, empowering women. It suggests a transition and serve the interest of all citizens, include those who will born. The green economy promotes good governance because it founded upon accountable, transparent, and resilient institution. The economy promotes equality within and between generation, and inclusive and non-discriminatory. It shares decision-making, benefits cost fairly, and avoids elite capture. What is elite capture? Elite capture is understood as an attitude or action taken by a person or group of people to influence policy making. It means that green economy policy have to independent from any influence. The third principle, the planetary boundaries principle, a green economy recognizes that all human flourishing, develop, depends upon a healthy natural world. It defends the world of nature and protects biodiversity, soil, water, air, and other ecosystem capitals. The fourth principle, the efficiency and sufficiency principle. A green economy is low carbon, diverse, and eco-friendly. It recognized that our single biggest economic challenge is the need to create prosperity within planetary boundaries, support sustainable consumption as well as sustainable production, low carbon development based on renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydroelectric, and hydrogen, etc. And the last principle, the good government. A green economy is guided by integrated, accountable, and resilient institutions. An inclusive green economy is evidence-based. Its norms and institutions are interdisciplinary, deploying both science and economic along with local knowledge for adaptive strategy. And Dr. Christine Bitinorio has declared that all the principles are important. No principle is more important than other principle. All the 5 principles integrated and all important. Okay, next. In implementing the green economy, the government must have policies that support these activities in various sectors. These policies should support the development of green economy and low carbon development strategies both regionally and nationally. Green policies should enable countries to manage their natural resources more sustainably and efficiently, diversify and secure the environment, and also increase social justice. The green economy policy requires two key ingredients. The first is integrated policy making. Integrated policy making refers to both horizontal sectoral integration, between different departments or profession in public authorities, and practical intergovernmental integration in policymaking between different tiers of government or combination of both. So this requires the involvement of several departments as well as cooperation between the state and local governments in the process of policymaking. So the policymaking ensures that every stakeholder involved in the policymaking. The second ingredient, a holistic outcome framework combining from environmental, social, and economic objectives. Environmental, social, and economic, also known as the 3 pillars of sustainability. So, to achieve true sustainability with the green economy implementation, we have to balance economic, social, and environmental sustainability factor in equal harmony. This means that all policies made by the government must consider these 3 factors in balanced manner. Next, please. Step back. Policy. Okay. Policy is very broad, very wide. From our perspective in law, policy is a regulation, but in fact, policy is not only regulation. The definition of policy is very, very broad. Before we go further, we will discuss about the definition of policy. There are another many terms in political science like democracy, policy, and power, but different definition will drawing on different access on the policy process and give us multiple perspective about what is policy. So we will discuss a few definitions of policy from the expert. The first, define policy is whatever government choose to do or not to do. It's very broad definition. And Cochrane define policy is the action of government and the intention that determine those actions. So the action of government and the reason behind the action. Hawkwood and Gunn give comprehensive definition. Policy they describe as a label for a field or activity, such as health policy, environmental policy. Policy also described as an expression of intent, the intention of the government, such as like the government will improve healthcare, the government will improve education, the government will improve about economy. Policy also described as specific proposal. A specific proposal means it's a document, manifesto, a white paper. In Indonesia, we have the term naskah akademik. It's a proposal for legislation. Policy also described as decision of government and the formal authorization of decision. This is policy from law perspective. This is called legislation or regulation in form of act, in form of government regulation, president decree, etc. And also, a policy can be described as a program, a package of legislation, staffing and funding, intermediate and ultimate outputs. For the example, the government have the policy to get better medical care and more doctors, so they issued a regulation or a policy to recruit more doctors. Policy also described as outcomes or what is actually achieved, like a better societal health, better higher education system, better civil service, etc. And also the policy can be described as a process and series of decisions, not an event and single decision. So the definition of policy is very, very broad, but because I'm a expertise in law, I will keep the definition of policy in my expertise, which is legislation and regulation. Okay, next. As you see in the picture, in policy making process, there is a policy cycle. The first cycle is agenda setting. What is agenda setting? Agenda setting is when the policymakers, the government, identifying problems that require government attention, deciding which issues deserve the most attention, and defining the nature of the problem. So the government, they make priority scale, which issue deserve the most attention and should be regulated, should need action in the first place. The second cycle is policy formulation. Policy formulation done in the legislature, where they're setting objectives, identifying the cost and estimating the effect of solution, choosing from a list of solutions and selecting policy instruments. So after they got the issues, the problems, they try to formulate how to solve the issues, and they choose also the policy instrument. Should it in act, or maybe it's enough on government regulation, or maybe regional regulation, etc. The third cycle is legitimation. Legitimation is a process when the legislator, the policymakers, ensuring that the chosen policy instrument have support to solve the problems. These measures include legislative approval, executive approval, seeking consent through consultation with interest group and reference. The fourth policy cycle is implementation. What is implementation? Implementation is when the policymaker establishing or employing an organization to take responsibility for the implementation, ensuring that the organization has the resources and decisions are carried out as planned. For example, in Indonesia, we have Komisi Pengawas Persaingan Usaha to implement the Indonesian competition law. And we have the Ministry of Environment to implement regulation related to environment. The study of implementation is based on the simple point that decisions made by policymakers may not be carried out successfully. Instead, we can identify an implementation gap which represents the difference between the state expectation of policymakers and actual policy outcomes. This gap in law perspective, we call its gap between the dasein and the dasolen, the gap between what is the ideal and what really happened in the society. And this is a problem. The fifth policy cycle is evaluation. Evaluation process refers to a process that assessing the extent to which policy was successful, if the policy was appropriate, implemented correctly, and had the desired effect. This process, evaluation process, involves assessing a top-down approach might identify to the implementation gap is small or if there is evidence of compliance. So the policymakers evaluate if this policy have been successfully implemented, or is there any gap between the desire and the reality in the society, or if there is any evidence of compliance from the society. And the last cycle is policy maintenance, succession, or termination. In this cycle, the policymaker, considering of the result of the evaluation, considering if the policy should be continued, modified, or discontinued. This decision is according to the result of evaluation. Okay, next. Okay, now we are focused in how policy making or policymakers to arrange policy that aiming in green economy. There are 10 considerations for policymakers how to formulate a policy that aiming in green economy. The first consideration is integrated social and environmental policy making. In this consideration, the policymakers have to generate a common vision of lasting national prosperity. It should work across government ministries and also with other national stakeholders. The policymakers support and adapt current planning and policy process rather than developing a new one of strategy. So the policymakers and the stakeholders, they generate a common vision and they adapt the current planning and policy process rather than developing a new one. In Indonesia, the government has set a list of regulations to be enacted in the national legislation program. We call it Prolegnas, so that there is a sequence of regulation that will be enacted. The second consideration is embrace holistic approaches to planning and monitoring progress on both poverty reduction and environmental protection. The policymakers should take a multi-dimensional approach to tackling poverty and promoting the welfare of minorities and vulnerable groups. The policymakers have to address their need for health, education, income, decent work, living standard, security, empowerment, resilience to stress and shocks, etc. But the policymaker has also extended environmental goals beyond greenhouse gas abatement to address whole ecosystem and respect for planetary boundaries. So the government, they have to take multidimensional approach to solve the poverty problems, but still protect the environment. In Indonesia, we have policy on corporate social responsibilities, or we call it CSR, and also environmental responsibilities for business actor. Both of these obligations are prioritized for the surrounding community. So the company, they should spend 2% of their profit to increase the welfare of the surrounding community. And also in Indonesia, the Constitution of 1945 stipulates that all Indonesian citizens have a right to obtain the welfare equally without discrimination. Okay, the third consideration is go beyond compensation, seek co-benefits, and ideally transformational change. The policymaker have to ask where are the synergies between social and environmental goals. Who will affect it with this policy and how they will affect it? How can the process protect poor people and also enhance their welfare, but also protect the environment? This consideration in Indonesia also accommodate with the policy on corporate social responsibilities and environmental responsibilities. The fourth consideration is focus on the creation or design green jobs. What is green jobs? Green jobs means sustained jobs. The policymaker should seek out pro-pure policy by considering locally based investment that create jobs with low financial resource and energy costs as alternative or complement to capital intensive nationally driven investment. So they have to prioritize the locally based investment. In And in Indonesia, the mineral coal mining law number 4, 2009, requires the construction or the company to construct smelters for the mining companies. This construction of smelters will increase the value of mining products, and also it creates jobs, especially for local residents. The fifth consideration is be aware of the bias and limit of economic methodologies and market instruments. So, for safeguard purpose, government often giving market-based instruments such as cash transfer. In Indonesia, it's called bantuan langsung tunai or BLT. But their ultimate effectiveness or the effectiveness of this cash transfer depends on institutional capacity and on procedural. Cash transfer or BLT in Indonesia is a government assistance program in the form of cash or other form of assistance. The first country to initiate this cash transfer was Brazil, and it was subsequently adopted by other countries. The amount of funds given and the mechanism used in cash countries vary depending on the government policy in the country. In Indonesia, the poor get around 400,000 rupiahs every month. But in giving this market instrument, this cash transfer, the government must be careful, because whether the provision of this assistance is effective or not, because there are so many examples that the this cash transfers is not on the budget and it used for non-basic needs. In Indonesia, for example, the cash transfer not used to buy foods, but they use it to buy cigarettes. It's real happening in Indonesia. This sixth consideration, promote pure people empowerment and address elite power. The policymaker should recognize the imbalanced power between the poor people and the elite power. So they have to ensure that the policies and services are designed for the local communities, prioritize the poor, and also protect the natural resources. Policies and services should recognize and address the influence of powerful elites and interests. And because sometimes the influence is not good for the policymaking. In Indonesia, in addition to protect the poor people, in addition the form of cash transfers, the government provide free education up to high school level and insurance through an instrument we call BPJS. And also the government provide easy access for small business to access the capitals through the government bank and through the non-governmental organization financing such as Baitul Makamwil. And also the government have National Zakat Agency, Basnas, to manage and distribute the zakat infak sodaqah funds for the poor. Okay, the seventh consideration, prioritize participation, especially of women and marginalized groups in policy making. So the policymakers should be designed that the women and marginalized groups have to develop their participatory. In Indonesia, law number 22 of 2007 concerning election stipulates that the composition of election organizers pays attention to the representation of women at least 30% in the parliament. And also, in Indonesia, we have Regional Representative Council or Dewan Perwakilan Daerah, and the member is come from 34 provinces in the Indonesia, especially from minorities. The 8th consideration support adaptive, context-specific, and local policy approaches. The policy making should recognize the influence of local socio-cultural factors. They have priorities. They have considering about the local wisdom. Because policies should be context-specific, not one size fits all. This means a policy maybe can implement better in one province, but maybe it cannot be successful if implemented in another province. So the policy making have to recognize the local socio-cultural and local wisdom in process of policy making. Policies must be adaptive and flexible to changing circumstances and project outcomes. In addition to policies that apply nationally in Indonesia, the local governments, the province governments have the authority to formulate regional policies that are adapted on their needs and their local wisdom. Especially, for example, we are in Yogyakarta. Yogyakarta was called as Daerah Istimewa or Special Region. So we have some privilege that the province government, they can formulate special policies to show our specialties. For example, in Yogyakarta, the governor was not elected in every 5 years. We have a lifelong governor, the Sultan Hamengkubuwono. So the governor of Yogyakarta will be replaced after Sultan is died, and the new government is the new Sultan in the future. So we in Yogyakarta, we never have a governor election because this is the local wisdom, the unique and the specialty of Yogyakarta. The 9th consideration considers spacing, timing, and pacing. We have to recognize that the implementation and green economy is not smooth. Also, Prof. Halimah declared that this green economy is costly and hard and complex. So the policymaker have to understand that the geographic of the country, migration of the people is also influence how they make formulate a policy. And in Indonesia, because the government realized that green economy is very high cost policy, Indonesia has prepared around 28,000 trillion rupiah funds for the implementation of green economy, especially in transportation sector. And the last consideration is ensure donor policy alignment. Who is the donor policy alignment in green economy? Is the UNIP. And the UNIP provides advocacy, demonstration of green economic approaches, and also support the countries in terms of development and mainstreaming macroeconomic policy to support the transition of green economy. So the country will not move alone. They will be assisted by the UNIP in implementing the green economy. Okay, next. Quite long slide. Next, please. Okay. In green economy, so I back to my expertise, there are green policy. What is green policy? Because in green economy, we have to greening the policy. Green policy is policy which provides environmental parameters to reduce the environmental impact of business operation and promote sustainable development to the organization. For example, green policy which implemented in Philippines and Japan. In the Philippines, please correct me if I'm wrong, the Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission published the draft guidelines for companies who wants to issue sustainability linked bonds. So there are already a bonds that green or sustainability. What are sustainability linked bonds? SLB or sustainability linked bonds is the bonds which issued from a company that they have a green or sustainable process in their business. And the second example is the Japanese government on February 10th approved the green transformation policy to set out Japan's strategy for meeting its goal of net zero carbon emission by 2050. The policy includes using nuclear power, boosting renewables, and introducing a carbon pricing mechanism to help the energy transition. Okay, so now the government already trying to greening all aspects of the policies, even in the monetary policies like the sustainability or bonds. Okay, next. I'm sorry because the picture is still in Indonesian. I will try to explain it. How about Indonesia? The government of Indonesia practice in implementing a green economy or to make policy. First, Indonesian government, they are greening the structure and process of economic development. In Indonesia, the government has implemented the concept of sustainability development, which focus on environmental issues. For example, by investing in green projects such as hazardous waste treatment center project and a renewable energy project. The collaboration began with the Special Economic Zone or KEK, Kawasan Ekonomi Eksklusif of M.K. and Mandalika. Mandalika is a zone where there is a circuit Mandalika. The second step is greening policy. In Indonesia, we know the term green constitution or green policy. In principle, the green constitution or green policy is a policy which strengthens the environmental protection to the level of the constitution so that the principle of sustainable development with an environmental perspective and protection to the environment have a strong legal basis. So every policy have to declare, have to strengthen about the environmental protection. In Indonesia, green constitution is reflected in the idea of human rights, as well as the concept of economic democracy, which is already written in the Constitution. Article 28H, paragraph 1, and Article 33, paragraph 4 of the 1945 Constitution. These two norms emphasize fundamental provision both regarding the guarantee of citizen right to a good and a healthy environment, as well as protecting nature from damage caused by economic activities. So the basis, legal basis of greening policy in Indonesia were already regulated in the 1945 Constitution. Third, greening of financial instrument and capital market. Indonesia also support the issuance of sustainability-linked bonds by companies in the capital market. So, Indonesian government support the issuance of bonds which issued by the company which focus in environmental protection. For greening industries, business, and corporation. Indonesian government doing this greening industries, business, and corporation by regulate about corporate social responsibility and environmental responsibility obligation for the business actors. And the last, greening education, mass media, and public. Green education is an educational model that utilizes nature as a source of learning so that children are proactive and adaptive to environmental problem, emphasize the principles of independence, responsibility, courage, and empathy for the use of the environment. In Indonesia, we have sekolah alam, which is the students, they study in outdoor and they are study about how to protect environment. And simple example, they have to wise to how to put their own waste, and the kids are they are introduced in how to keep the environment safe and clean. Okay, and greening mass media means it's an effort to incorporate environmental issues into the agenda of the mass media in Indonesia, in purpose so that all citizens, all the people in Indonesia will be recognized that environmental issues is important and everybody have responsibility to take care of the environment. Okay, next. From this picture, you can see that the Indonesian government in implementing the green economy jointly with the Indonesia Green Growth Program and the Global Green Growth Institute through the Ministry of National Development or Kementerian Bappenas in involving a number of ministries and local governments in implementing this green economy. This image shows the structure of interagency cooperation in realizing and implementing green economy in Indonesia, which involve ministries, institutions, academic institutions, and state-owned enterprise. And they implement the green economy which relate with their business and their areas and their field. Okay, next. Next, please. Okay. How about Indonesian practice in policy making in green economy? First, the Indonesian government has signed the Paris Agreement as a form of involvement in a global commitment to tackling climate change. And also in national policy, the green economy is already planned in the planning document has been included in the 2020 and 2024 National Medium-Term Development Plan, or RPGMN. This RPGMN have three priority programs, namely improving environmental quality, increasing disaster resilience and climate change, and low carbon development. In environmental preservation, it is mandatory for mining companies to have a nursery or seed showing as one of the implementation of sustainable forest management. So a mining company, they have obligation to replanting the trees in their mining areas. In low carbon development, the Indonesia has set a policy direction through the low carbon development by using nationally determined contribution, and Indonesia is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emission by 29% in 2030. And also, the Indonesian government already regulate about the cap and trade scheme related to low carbon. To create Indonesia's low carbon green economy, the government has a net zero emission target in 2060. Jepun target is in 2050. It costs about 28,000 trillion rupiah. And Indonesia also using 6 renewable energy sources like ocean waves, geothermal, bioenergy, water, wind, and solar heat. And the government already retired the steam power plant who use coal. And now Indonesian government already built so many power plants which is used hydroelectric, which use water, is like Cirata hydropower plant in West Java, and also power plants which use wind or pembangkit listrik tenaga bayu, wind power plants. In Indonesia we have two in Sidrap and Jeneponto in South Sulawesi, and we also have solar power plant in North Sulawesi, Cirata, West Java, in Bali, and we have the largest solar power plant in the world in the Karimun, Riau. Okay, and then the government also issued and enacted regulation which support green economy, such as the incentive for purchasing of electric cars and motorbikes, and also the cap and trade scheme for reduce carbon, and with giving the incentive in purchasing of electric cars and motorbikes, the government hopes that the public interest is in buying vehicles, electric vehicle will increase, and the using of unrenewable natural resources will decrease slowly. Okay, and next. So, what is the conclusion of today's discussion? First, for the sake of sustainability in human life, greedy economic behavior must be stopped, and we have to switch to the implementation or the application of green economy. But we have to realize also that implementing or application of green economy is very complex process, time-consuming, and high cost. However, This must be implemented in order to save natural resources and human resources and for the sustained planet. The application of green economy must be carried out in all sectors, one of which is in the policy sectors, where the government must develop a green policy. Green policy is policies that consider social, economic, and environmental factors in a balanced manner. Green policy is important because environmental sovereignty must have a legal basis. And also, the commitment in implementing green economy is not only in our country, but all countries in the world must be committed to implementing green economy because this earth belongs to us together. We stay in one earth. UNIP organization has a responsibility in advocating and assisting all countries in implementing green economy. And the last conclusion, the success of the green economy implementation is not only in the hands of the governments or the business sectors or the UNIP, but also in the hand of all of us because all of us are citizens of the world. Okay, thank you. This is my last slide, and I'm sorry if there is any imperfection in my materials. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Next is the discussion session. I will open two question session. One session, there are 3 questions. If you have question, you can write in the chat room. Okay, let's start from now. Okay. Okay, doctor, you have many questions in here. So you may read the question or I read.
Please give me a few minutes to read the question.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. So there are questions from first from Harvey Vertelvo, and then for Herbert Buna, and V. Oliveros, and Richie. Okay, V. Oliveros, you have 2 questions. Okay, I will try to answer. Harvey Vertulfo, please, would you explain your answer because you only state your.
That's not a question, doctor.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay.
That was a that I was trying to affirm what you were saying for the Philippines.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will continue to Herbert Buna from Bukitnon. How does the Indonesian government address its policy loopholes in which one prime example the Indonesian in 2016? Okay, about waste and hazardous. It's still a problem in Indonesia. So I can say that my government have not successful in address the policy loopholes especially in waste, because recently in Indonesia, in a few provinces in the region, we have big problems related to waste. So if Albert asks me, how does the Indonesian government address its policy loopholes, I can state that our government have been successful at all due to this waste, hazardous toxic waste, and the other kind of waste. So the waste control is still a big problem in Indonesia recently. So if they're in Bali, yes, there are classification of waste such as metal and paper waste, but in fact, in Indonesia, those kind of waste is still can enter Indonesia without document. So this is a very huge problems, and our government is not successful yet in control or solve this problem. That is my answer for Albert Buna. So is the Indonesian government doing nothing? In fact, yes. So the regulation and the implementation is still a gap, and this is a very huge problem until today, recently. Okay, I continue with the Olivers. With regards to policy making, the power to legislate and enact law lies in legislative or the parliament in developing countries. To proceed towards green economy is often looked over by administration. In a polarized political landscape inside the legislative branch with legislators that are part of huge industries, corporation, and business, yes, correct, because many of our legislators, they are part of business. And also our president is a business actor also. And business that contribute to the deterioration of the environment, this process guidelines to enact green policies. What can be done to ensure that the quality of legislation is free from personal interest? P. Oliveros. We have in Indonesia, we have what I called before prolegnas, which is, excuse me, in prolegnas, there are three parties who can propose the concept of regulation. The first party is Regional Representative Council, which is a council that the member is the representative from 34 provinces in Indonesia. And also the second party is the government, which is the president and the minister. They can also propose a policy. And the third is the House of Representatives or the legislator itself. To ensure that the regulation or the policy is free from influence or conflict of interest, there are a few agenda we usually do. Okay, the regulation or the policy, before they are enacted, the government, they have a few process. The first process is socialization process, where the legislator, they socialize the draft of the policy to the people, to the stakeholders, to the law expert. And then after the socialization, they do a validity test, which means the draft of the policy will be reviewed by some expertise and reviewed by some NGOs. So the expertise and the NGOs can give their opinion to the policy draft. But in fact, this process, the socialization process and the validity test, we call in Indonesia uji sahih, it's also cannot ensure that the legislation is free from personal interest, because as we know, the politics is very, very, dirty. So every single person who enter the politics, who sit in the legislator chair, they take their own interest, political interest, personal interest, or their group interest. So even though we already through the socialization process to keep transparency and uji sahih or validity test, we cannot ensure 100% that this legislation is free from personal interest. That is my answer, P. Oliveras. So nobody, I think in every country in this world, nobody, no country, no people can ensure that the legislation formulated by the legislator is free from personal interest. But we can ensure that the legislation already formulated through the right procedures. Okay, is that clear for the Oliveras?
Thank you very much.
Okay. And then Brici Zarina Akbayani. With regards to the 5 principles, ma'am, you said that all principles are interdependent with each other. However, I'm just confused, doctor, in this principle can be considered as indicators in order to spot or identify a state that is practicing green economy. If so, if one principle is missing, can it still be called green economy or a defective green economy? This 5 principle is integrated and interdependent. So if there are a state that practicing green economy, but one principle is missing, I think, on my opinion, please correct me if I'm wrong, we cannot call the country implemented a green economy. Maybe they are trying to doing some transition or their economic system to green economy, maybe, but we cannot call them they have implemented the green economy. So the 5 principles have to implement it as a unity. So we cannot missing 1 or 2 of it. That's my answer for Brici Zarina. So if a country wants to implement the green economy, they have to they have to implement the 5 principles. All of it. All of them. Thank you. Okay. Oliveras, you have another question? So I will skip. For Tan Yin Pyo from Mahidol University, what mechanism will be in place to adjust strategies and action based on the outcomes and evaluation regarding to the policy making cycle? And are there any challenges such as the complaints from the elite class while the policy focusing on vulnerable communities? Okay. Are there any role conflicts or clashes between different ministries such as the Ministry of Energy? Okay, 3 questions. I will take 1 minute. Okay. I don't know. This is Miss Tan Jin Pyo or Mr. or Mrs. Tan Jin Pyo from Mahidol. First, what mechanism will be place to adjust strategies and action based on outcomes and evaluation regarding to the policy making cycle. So when the policy already implemented, already enacted in Indonesia, there is a mechanism that can be done if this regulation is not as the desire of the community or the society. In Indonesia, this mechanism called judicial review mechanism. So the stakeholders, the people, the Indonesian citizen who have judged or object with this policy, they can do a judicial review, lawsuit, and the organization who take the responsibility for this judicial review is the constitutional court in Indonesian called Mahkamah Konstitusi. So if the citizens or any stakeholders in Indonesia found that the policy was not correct, or they object with this policy, or they found this policy is harm people, or harm the economy, or harm the society, or maybe intolerant, they can do judicial review lawsuits at the Constitutional Court. Is the answer for the first question. Okay, the second question: are there any challenges such as the complaints from the elite class while the policy is focusing on vulnerable communities? How the balance achieved? There are always the complaints in the politics. Maybe the expert on politics knows well more than me, but in the policy-making process, there always be a complaint. But this complaint, it would not be expressed explicitly. There will be complaint behind. So the society, the citizen won't know that there are any complaints. But if are there any complaints? Yes, there are always any complaints. But this is a political process. So in political process, there are a bargaining between government and the elite class, and this bargaining will not express publicly. So the citizen cannot know who the elite class who give complaints and how the bargaining process is done. So in procedural, the policy making have to be transparent, but in political, we never know what happened behind this policy making and how the political bargaining in the legislature. This is the challenge, the biggest challenge. Okay, how will the balance achieved? In my own opinion, in Indonesia, some regulation very balance achieved, but some regulation also focus on elite class. The recent regulation which is contradictive is the Omnibus Law. The citizen of Indonesia said that this Omnibus Law too many give freedom and chance for the elite class and not balance with the poor. But the government have their own opinion that this Omnibus Law already balanced in protecting the poor and giving chance to the elite class. But we always have different opinion with the government. It's common in every country. Okay. The third question: Are there any role conflicts or crises between different ministers, such as the Minister of Energy and Ministry of Environment, when they focus on their respective outcomes? How are these conflict balanced and coordinated? So in Indonesia, we have between Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Environment, we have a coordinator ministry. So the cooperation, the discussion was coordinated by the coordination ministry. Are there any role conflicts or clashes? Obviously, there are no conflicts or clashes, but again and again, I said that policy making is a political process. We don't know the bargaining process behind the scene. So publicly, I can say that no conflicts, but behind the scene, we never know. How this conflict balance, because in Indonesia, we have the coordinator ministry, so the discussion done in coordinate of the coordination ministry. So the coordination ministry position is higher than the ministry. So the ministry have to obey and they have to respect the coordination ministry. Okay, that's for Tan Zinpyo from Maidol. Book Tristan. Okay, from Tristan. What are the major challenges and criticism surrounding Indonesian green policy practice, including their impact on deforestation, biodiversity loss, and carbon emission? How do these policies address indigenous rights, community involvement, sustainable practice to combat environmental issues? Additionally, what step has the government do? Okay, from the policy perspective, the Indonesian policy is already ideal. But again, there always a gap between the ideal policy with the implementation or the reality. The major challenges is that Indonesia is one country that gain the most income or get earning the most income from mining and renewable resources, and also from kelapa sawit. What is kelapa sawit in English? Wait. Nah, kelapa sawit. What's kelapa sawit in English? Palm oil, sorry, palm oil. Indonesia is the one of country with the biggest earnings or revenue is from unrenewable resources such as gas, oil, coal, nickel, gold, and also palm oil. But in implementation, the mining company, the palm oil company, is the biggest company who damage the environment. So this is a contradiction between the government needs the revenue, the profit, the tax, and this revenue source is the biggest company who damage the environment. This is the biggest challenges. And also in policy making process, the government of Indonesia trying to balance between the take care of the revenue and take care of the environment, and this is very hard to do. The policies also address indigenous rights in policies, but in practically, so many indigenous get losses from the business practice. So what government have to do, the government is trying to balance to protect the environment, but they have to keep the revenue source. So this again and again is a political bargaining behind the screen. Yes, that's my answer for Tristan. But I can ensure that Indonesian government has done the best in enacted a few regulation which protect environment, but they have very hard tasks to do in balance the economic benefit and the environmental protection. Okay, and next, Eliza Polo. During the implementation of the green policies in Indonesia, are there any big business who oppose as it affects their traditional way of operating, or was it smoothly implemented? No policy can smoothly implement it. There always be conflict. There always be big business who protest, he complains. But again, the complaints were shared behind the scene. It was political bargaining. So the complaints, the opposition, they never do it publicly. But the regulation never smoothly implemented. But the conflicts is not publicly declared, if you know what I mean. Okay. Harvey. Wouldn't a laissez-faire policy benefit the most? The richer get richer, but the poor get richer. I believe reducing regulation reduce corruption and tax, but increase profit and wealth. So then there be more incentive for public transport first before taking vehicle usage. Okay, first, laissez-faire, the free market theory. Okay, because I'm a competition lecturer. The ideal condition in a laissez-faire policy, the richer gets richer, the poor gets richer, is ideal desired. But in practically, the richer gets richer and the poor still remains poor. Why? Because the richer, when they get richer, they will dominate the market, and there are lack chance for the poor to develop their economy. So laissez-faire may be ideal, but nowadays the government has to involve to regulate so that the richer, the big business, they can dominate the market, they can dominate the production, they can arrange the price and the production, etc. So the competition law giving freedom for the business actors, but they also involve to ensure that this business, they don't dominate the market and the small business still get any chance and opportunity to develop their business. Okay, shouldn't there be more incentive for public transports first before taxing vehicle usage? Okay, transportation is a very classic problem in Indonesia. Indonesia is, I'm sorry, this is my opinion. Indonesia is one of maybe the worst public transport country in the world, because, for example, in Jakarta, Jakarta always have traffic. Maybe if you ever stay to Jakarta, Jakarta have a very high traffic. But why the citizen, they prefer to take their own vehicle than take the public transport, because the public transport is not integrated well. So if you take a train or MRT or LRT, you have to take a few steps of public transport so that you get home. It takes times and many route is not integrated well. it's very small example in Jakarta. How about in another region, in Yogyakarta, we have very small amount of public transport. That's why Indonesian people is not a public transport people. They prefer to use their own vehicle than use public transportation. Shouldn't there be more incentive for public transport first before taxing vehicle use? I definitely agree with your opinion. But in Indonesia, maybe it will take many years to make the citizens move to public transport and leave their personal vehicle, because the public transport in Indonesia, the infrastructure is not ready yet, is not integrated yet. Okay. From Paul Jason Moreno, CMU. Throughout our discussion, we saw the commitment of Indonesia to implement green policies. So my question is, what significant milestone has Indonesia achieved as this moment? Significant milestone Indonesia achieved as this moment is that Indonesia finally enacted a few regulations which implemented the green economy, such as I'm sorry, I have to read, such as the presidential decree, which is retire the steam power plant which use coal, and the regulation about carbon tax to reduce carbon use in Indonesia, and also the build up of renewable energy resources, and also a regulation about the obligation for the mining company to build smelter in Indonesia. Maybe you ever heard about Freeport in Papua is the biggest gold mining company, and now they are obliged to build smelter in Indonesia. So maybe the milestone is the Indonesian government already give legal basis for the implementation of green economy, but the result, the implementation successful or not, we cannot see in this moment because the regulation has enacted just a few moments ago. Okay, and Princess Marie Tomero.
Time is over.
Okay, time is over. I'm sorry. Okay.
Continue answer or stop me?
Okay, maybe I will have a closing speech before we start this session. Dear audience from Philippines, from Thailand, thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry if maybe I can fulfill your needs or answer. I'm sorry if I have answered it cannot fulfill your desire, and thank you also for the international government programs IGoP, and thank you for having me. Thank you for all the audience and Nana as the moderator. I'm sorry we can discuss many longer because time is up, and I hope we can meet in another chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Maybe if participants have question and has not been answered, you can ask via the WhatsApp group, yeah, and
yes,
we will convey it to Doctor.
Okay, and you also can email me with my email was on the presentation. You can ask the email from the summer school organizer. Thank you.
Okay, Doctor. Thank you. Before we end the meeting, we would like to take a picture together. Please open your camera. Okay, let's smile. 1, 2, 3. Next slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, it's enough. You may leave the meeting and don't forget to join the meeting at 1 p.m. of Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and see you later. Thank you.
Doctor.